I'm a sports medicine physician and I practice in Sydney in Australia, and I've got a strong metabolic interest in my practice, and I see a lot of people with metabolic conditions, and I see a lot of patients on a variety of diets. I see people coming in on vegan diets. I see people coming in on carnivore diets. So I see the full spectrum. First of all, that's just madness. I mean, there's no good evidence that shows that we should be having seed oils. I guess part of the myth of how this got established is through an irrational fear of saturated fat. We've basically been told a lie. We've been told that saturated fats are going to kill us, when in actual fact, all the good quality evidence shows the exact opposite. And not only that the good quality evidence, the findings have actually been, I guess, swept under the carpet. They've been deliberately kept out of public view, including from scientists and medical doctors. The Sydney Diet Hard Study and the Minnesota Coronary experiment. And they were both randomized controlled trials that looked at what happened when you removed saturated fat from the diet and replaced it with vegetable oils, seed oils. And what they both found was that cholesterol would go down, but mortality rates would increase. And unfortunately, while these studies were completed in 1973, the findings actually weren't published until 2013 and 2016, respectively. So, I mean, they were completely swept under the carpet. This is an absolute, it should be a widespread scandal. The investigators in one of the studies were asked why they didn't publish their results. They actually said, well, we didn't get the results we wanted. They actually deliberately, they didn't get the results that would support their hypothesis that they personally believed in. The reason that we're scared of saturated fat is we're told that it will increase our LDL cholesterol level. And that's actually wrong on two levels. First of all, the best data we have shows that people with higher LDL levels live longer. On average, higher LDL level confers longevity. And number two, which is absolutely fascinating, is that there is no known mechanism by which saturated fats actually increase LDL cholesterol. Rather, there's known mechanisms by which seed oils reduce LDL cholesterol because they have these chemicals called sterols. They're plant chemicals, phytochemicals, plant sterols, that our body will absorb thinking that it can use it, but it can't actually assimilate it into the body, so it forces our cholesterol levels to lower. So when we talk about saturated fats increasing cholesterol levels, they're not increasing cholesterol levels physiologically. They're merely restoring them to a level. If any of your listeners out there and they get into an argument with or a discussion, a debate with anybody about saturated fats, ask them what the mechanism is by which saturated fats actually increase LDL levels. It'll be an interesting response. There's this belief that omega-6 fats, which form the bulk of the oil, the fats in seed oils, are inherently harmful. Right. And that is demonstrably false. We've got two types of polyunsaturated fat. So a polyunsaturated fat simply refers to having a double bond between two carbon atoms, and that double bond is chemically reactive. It can do what we call oxidize. And that oxidation can actually be absorbed into our body and can do us damage. Poly, meaning many. So polyunsaturated fats have more than one of these double bonds. Monounsaturated fats like olive oil, which is constituted of 70% oleic acid, has only a single double bond, and saturated fats don't have any of these double bonds. So what actually happens is that when we consume a seed oil, a vegetable oil, we're consuming fats which are prone to oxidation, and the oxidation is actually what's doing the damage. It just so happens that most seed oils are actually disproportionately made of omega-6 fats. But it's not the omega-6 fats themselves that do the damage. It's the fact that whenever you have a polyunsaturated fat, it oxidizes rapidly within hours of production, literally within hours. Oh. And when you're consuming it, you're consuming that oxidation. That's the bad news there. Now, the arachidonic acid is a chemical that's formed from the omega-6s. And it can get turned into multiple other inflammatory chemicals. But in actual fact, the arachidonic acid is not inflammatory. It will only turn into these inflammatory substrates if there's an inflammatory trigger. If you remove inflammatory triggers, that arachidonic acid will sit there quite happily and won't do anything bad at all. Now, for proof of this, we go to one of the doyens of low carb, Jeff Volek. He was involved in a study that was published in 2019, and that looked at the fatty acid profiles in people who went on a low carbohydrate intervention versus people on high carbohydrate diets. And what they actually found was that the arachidonic acid level in the people on low carbohydrate diets increased. And this is hugely important to understand because every other inflammatory marker reduced. So it really goes to show that the reason the arachidonic acid was increasing was simply because it wasn't, you removed the inflammatory triggers and it wasn't being converted into these other downstream products that cause inflammation, that are associated with inflammation.